This is Coffee with Grant. I'm Grant. This is Coffee. This really is Ruby Dog. Oh, you're very sweet. Yes. And today, I'm gonna get off into a nerd rant. Yes, a nerd rant. So it's in kind of a funny situation. Is I did a whole thing on how I was getting burnt out on social media, and how that was bad for my brain, and about phone addiction, right? And then I immediately got sick. Like I had, if you listen to that video, I have like a little cough through it, and that little cough turned into a big cough, which turned into that night having me have a fever of 100+ degrees, and I was shaking, like when you get that like the chills and the fever chills where you're like super cold and you can't stop shivering. It was that, and I'm sitting there in the kitchen, and my wife is like, "Really? You've only been without your phone for like 5 hours?" And I'm like, "This isn't phone withdrawal. I'm like actually sick." But it's like, yeah, I'm so addicted to my phone that I get flu-like symptoms whenever I turn it off. No, I think pretty sure I had COVID again. Um, it's one of those things where it's like, unless you do the test at the exact right moment, and the right moment happened to be when I had a fever for 3 straight days, and I was just like miserable and could barely get out of bed. And that sucked, yeah. And I'm still on the tail end of it, which is why we had a little gap in the old videos, because you didn't want to see me come in the morning and just hack into the screen for 10 minutes, hack at the screen for 10 minutes, and then just be like, "Oh, I'm going back to bed." um yeah, there's something going around, man. So but while I was sick, I watched the end of the Fallout TV show series, which is great. Quite possibly the best adaptation of a a purely video game franchise to a TV show that I think exists. I'm trying to think of another one. There have been some pretty bad adaptations, and I'm like the Mario movie, but I'm like, that was a video game to a movie. This was in a TV series. But there's been some notoriously bad TV adaptations of video game franchises. And this one, they finally did it just beautifully. It's like they took everything about. We could do another video on like good storytelling, but they took everything about Fallout and distilled it down to its core elements, and then worked within those, like put those as world rules and did not break them. So it's like, oh, what does the Fallout universe have? What are some of the tropes that are reliable? And then also, it was pretty obvious that the people who wrote and adapted the TV show had been big fans of the game, because they put little winks and nods to some of the player activity that you inevitably get up to when you're playing Fallout. And it was a good, it's a great series, and that got me the itch again. Okay, that got the itch going to play the games again, right? So for those of you who are like, have never played a Fallout game and didn't watch the series, Fallout I really love it for how unapologetically itself it is. It is a post-apocalyptic nuclear, like retrofuturism world, where the world environment invented nuclear power and then never went further to like solar. It's like everything is nuclear powered, or in some cases it's diesel powered. And then they were like, what if we turned that up and had robots? And think of like almost like Jetsons futurism, kind of a little bit. It's that nuclear age of the 50s, and what if you just extended that for 100 years, and then into this hypothetical world added nuclear war. So the idea is, okay, the 50s were so our 50s were so concerned with the threat of nuclear war and the Cold War and what might happen, and the whole like duck and cover, civil defense, build yourself a fallout shelter, etc. And they go, well, what would happen if somebody actually dropped the bomb? And in this case, the Fallout universe, the bombs fall in the year 2077. So we got a little time there. And then most of the, I'm trying to say most because almost all the content, aside from some little vignettes that you get in part of the gameplay, is you playing a created character, which is either come out of a vault, like a big, huge Fallout shelter, or you are, and then you get to go explore this new wasteland and navigate its challenges, and it's full of all sorts of fun. I'm gonna say like almost like 1950s sci-fi storytelling elements as well. You know, there's rogue robots that you have to parlay with or defeat. There's raiders who have set up their faction camp and who are really aggressive. There's super mutants who've been mutated by some sort of nefarious government engineered virus, or there's ghouls who are essentially like the undead zombies, but they're made undead by radiation, and some of them are sentient and some of them have like gone haywire and the whole thing. And then there's all these different factions that play within this world, and it's a really rich world building experience. For a Bethesda game, I would argue that the Fallout series, I mean, aside from, of course, Skyrim, which you can play on your Samsung smart fridge, they've readapted it so many times, I would say that Fallout is probably their most successful storytelling effort. Even over Skyrim, there are things in Fallout that resonate, I think, more with the fan base than Skyrim does. And so they've put this. I mean, I love it because you can kind of project your own play style in there. There's one really infamous mechanic that was in the early Fallout games, Fallout 1 and 2, where you have your character and you get to select your stats, your special stats, so strength, endurance, charisma, intelligence, luck, etc. And if you select your intelligence at 1, if you put your at the lowest intelligence level, then as you go through the rest of the game, you lose the ability to make like articulate sentences. And so the game developers built this in where if your intelligence is like 1, normally you'd walk up and you'd say, "Hi, is this a store? I'd like to buy something." And you always had this dialogue tree options, and if your intelligence is at 1, you're like, "Me need thing, give thing." And people are like, "Oh, you're one of those." Like, it's little stuff like that where you can tweak how you role play in the game and do different characters and have a completely different experience based on what you're bringing to it, which is a lot of fun. Playing a sneaky assassin who sneaks around the wasteland and snipes people from a distance is a completely different play experience to running around this game environment with a giant sledgehammer dressed as Grognak the Barbarian and trying your best to bonk everything in the head. And it's a lot of fun. I've put hundreds and hundreds of hours into Fallout games over the years. Not hard since Fallout 4 came out in 2008, I want to say. Something like that. It's been out for a hot second. I'd have to look it up. Let's get to my gripe. My gripe is, and this has always pissed me off with most of the Fallout games, is that everything is far dirtier and decrepit than it needs to be. And Fallout 4 especially. So it's like the idea that nuclear bombs are going to fall, okay? In the timeline of Fallout, nuclear bombs drop 2077, okay? Then in Fallout 4, your main character goes into a vault. They are cryogenically frozen, and they emerge 210 years later in the year 2287. Okay? 210 years. It's a long time. And you come out, And there are people walking around. Like you come out of there, and there's a couple of things, and this is where this is just mostly going to be. I'm going to stop explaining the rest of the world. This is mostly going to be for people who are fans of this series. Everything is super shitty, and my theory is that human civilization would have almost completely rebuilt itself over 200 years. There's no logical reason why everything should still be broken. Like, why there are active settlements where you go to Diamond City, and Diamond City's like, oh yeah, I'm born and raised in Diamond City. My parents came here, and they still don't have a functional toilet. Like, there's still like there are bathrooms canonically throughout Fallout. It's one of the few video games that decided to add bathrooms back in, and they're just like a cracked bowl and it's ruined, and the stall's falling in, and you're like, you're telling me that you have a multi-generational city that's been here possibly 100 years, and you can't fix the toilet. Like, everything is people will inherently this is people will inherently clean is the thing. People will inherently want their environments to be orderly because it's a sense of control. It is the notion of gardening. This is why people garden. It is that symbolic nature of humans conquering their environment, of bringing what is this wild force, which is this unpredictability of nature, into a controlled environment and bending it to your will. And so if you are literally bringing, plants and useful herbs and stuff into a garden and tending them and keeping them in an enclosure, you are bringing nature under your will. But at the same time, as if you are conquering your environment, you are adding more safety things, you are building stronger structures, etc. You're not just going to leave piles of debris all over the place. And that's the argument, is that they've gotten the timeline wrong. It's like everything in the world that you're exploring would be... You're groaning? Yeah, it's because you're tired of hearing this. I've been stuck in the house with you, being sick, and you're the only person I can rant to. Now, everything that you see makes sense if it was like 30 or so years after the bombs dropped. Partially because if you look up unless the Fallout universe utilizes some sort of extra radioactive material in their bombs, mostly the radiation would have completely dissipated at the top end of like 50, 60 years later. So the idea that there's like still hot spots of radiation where some bombs fell and there's still irradiated food from that fallout tells you, first off, that the timeline is broken and that you're just being told one thing and it doesn't make any sense. There is, it's a certain suspension of disbelief, but the idea that would still be the case 210 years later. Like, if we're thinking about that in terms of right now, it's like, okay, we go to 2025. If we go back 210 years, that would put us at 1815. And if you think about all of the technological advancements that the US made and the population growth that was possible from 1815 to 2025, 2026, whatever, forgot what year it was. That's what being sick in January does. You're just like, what fucking year is it? And if we look at that historically, they didn't have the over those 210 years, they didn't have technology functional already. So imagine, it's like, I think the argument that Bethesda's trying to make with this is going like, oh no, nuclear bombs would wipe everybody back to a dark age, and there would just be a perpetual period of chaos and arrested development where no one's going to progress and everybody's going to do the bare minimum. However, that kind of breaks down because you have very, very obvious functional technology that you could still repurpose and reclaim for retaming and rebuilding civilization, in the form of sentient robots that can lift heavier loads than you, that can move things, that can build stuff, in the form of functional computer terminals that can do high-end processing, in the form of energy weapons and the ability to defend yourself against some of the crazy monsters and factions that want to do you harm. And like, all of those things would speed run getting civilization set up again. So when you're going around the universe, and I understand this is the way that they program the game, loot in Fallout and any Bethesda game really is randomized. So Occasionally, if there's a quest, a game dev went through and manually said this thing is in this box. But for pretty much everything else, the system determines what things are in which boxes based off of apparently a very loose put certain shit in certain boxes. Some of that the player can manipulate by getting perks. So the perk of, let's say, find more ammunition in containers, what that does on the back end is it adjusts the math that is putting things in boxes for you, and so it says, oh, put more of this thing in boxes for the player. And what tends to happen is this this storytelling immersion breaking thing where you have this complete mix of pre-war artifacts, things before the bombs dropped. Again, kind of a stretch, 210 years out, but whatever. And then post-war wasteland artifacts, things that were constructed in the wasteland that wouldn't exist pre-war, and you have them kind of intermittently strewn about all over the place, and and sometimes it's like it doesn't matter, and a lot of times it doesn't make any goddamn sense. And so, like, for example, picking this up again, you play through the intro, you run out to Sanctuary Hills. There is it's very much implied that no one has visited this place. The whole thing is run down. You run out to Sanctuary Hills. There is a bunker in the basement, which is locked. You have to unlock it. In the basement of one of your neighbors, you unlock it and you go in there, and this is like the bomb shelter where your neighbor was going to hang out, and I guess he didn't make it. And in there is a safe, which is still locked, which you can then pick. And inside the safe is an improvised, or was, in my case of the random rolling, was an improvised pipe weapon, which is an improvised firearm that people made after the bombs dropped. So it's like, okay, so this guy was either like really into a nutbag and really into improvised weaponry out of old pipes and stuff laying around, or the game just like completely broke your immersion in the very first little area that you go into. And then sitting next to the safe is a caps stash. And the cap stash is something where bottle caps are now the currency, but why would anybody pre-war have a stash of bottle caps? Because they're not currency. It's little stuff like that where it's like, oh, a little more care could be done. But then we get into things like, do Mr. Handy robots need fuel? Riddle me this, internet. Because around every single Mr. Handy robot in the game, including Cogsworth, who we start off the game with, there is a room where the box where he came in, and then there's also a big thing of Mr. Handy fuel. It's a thing. You can collect them throughout the thing. And then we walk out of Vault 111 210 years later, and Cogsworth is apparently still running. It is a robot that hovers based off of, as far as we can tell, a actively burning jet engine. How that doesn't just melt the linoleum as he floats around your house, whatever. But he also has a flamethrower, because he's a robot to take care of children and do your gardening and do your laundry, and he has a buzzsaw in one hand and a flamethrower on the other hand and a two-fingered claw in the middle. And those are all the things, really traditionally, that one needs to take care of a house. And I'm like, is it fuel for the flamethrower? Does he run off of some sort of internal power source that also creates an infinite jet stream that allows him to fly? Why is there fuel if you don't need it to give the thing to the fuel? And the answer is, you don't think about it too hard. It's the future. And in this universe, apparently robots never run out of power unless it's convenient for the plot. But at the same time, like, shouldn't... Okay, so logically here, we're going to run this through. Like, so we have a robot whose only task was to maintain my house. Keep it nice. Keep the paint on, the whole thing. Shouldn't my house be the only one on the block that is perfect? That has still lovely little flowers and paint on the doors and clean windows, and then Cogsworth is like, oh, you came home, sir. Whoa. What about baby Sean? And then, yeah, that would make sense, but that's not the case. He's just been kind of like moping around, but he's still active. So it's either we should have found him out of juice and then like refueled him and powered him back on, and he'd be like, "What year is it?" Or he should have been active the whole time and been doing his. They don't think about that. And when you play through the game, every time you start through it, you have to go through this one little thing. And so I've gone through that interaction probably 100 times, and it's pissing me off, is what it's doing. So yeah, so we get into this thing where I was like, all right, it wouldn't be that dirty. Like I get it, like how I did a little math on this, and it's somewhere in the neighborhood of if you started with 50 people that survived, like 50 people of childbearing age, and let's say, just for the sake of example, it's 25 men, 25 women, and they're all like cool with partnering off evenly. You know, like everybody pick a number, year one, year two, whatever. If they were to all have children, and if they had, let's say, 4 or 5 kids each, if you continued that pattern by the end of, and you did like generationals, they start like reproducing at like 18 because, you know, it's like post-apocalyptic world stuff. You would have somewhere in the neighborhood of like 20,000 people from 50 over the course of 210 years. And then the thing is, the Commonwealth in Fallout 4 has way more than 50 people in it. So the idea being like, there probably were more survivors than 50 to start with, meaning they probably logically would have coalesced into a civilization. And yeah, after the first 30 years, like generationally, logically speaking, the first like 10 to 15 years is people going, oh shit, outside is radioactive, let's not go outside, let's put on radiation suits, let's try to figure out what resources we have to survive, right? So that'll be either hold up in your bunker, you're probably dead, or, you know, trying to find a source of clean food, clean water, and shelter and protection. And inevitably, there's going to be a group of people who figure this out. And if they figure it out, what they're going to do next is pave the way to have another generation of humans so society can keep going. So within the first 10 to 15 years, they're going to want to identify a safe space and start to defend that and build a little socialized society. If you continue to build that over the course of the next 40 or 50 years, you're going to start having this environment that branches out to the point where you have a effective division of labor to go out into the world, scout for resources, but also clean out threats and start to rebuild infrastructure. And it's also been demonstrated in the Fallout universe that there are still functional industrial manufacturing and infrastructure things, right? Like they're still running in some cases. So the idea is like, oh, well, there is a industrial water treatment facility right over there, and we can go over to it. It's within walking distance. We can go over to it. We can flip the switch on, and we now have industrial clean water for more people than we could ever possibly have in our little settlement. Boom, water taken care of. We got power from someplace because we still have nuclear power. There's nuclear power cores. There's other things that continue to power things. Lighting and electricity is a very easy commodity to find. Okay, so now we got power, we've got water, and then it becomes like scavenging and finding new manufacturing for textiles, so you can do new cushions and new mattresses and new attire and armor, and that is going to take maybe a generation to get going, to start to explore and do that. And then at that point, you've got advanced robotics, you've hopefully got rebuilt vehicles and re-engineered, and you're starting even a further division of labor where you're going to get people who are starting to specialize. People are starting to look at technology and reverse engineer it and say, oh, well, we can, this bulldozer isn't running, but I can see how in core how it works, and we'll take the rusted and the damaged pieces out, put new stuff in, and build things that can help remove all the debris from the streets, and then start making new building materials, right? We either salvage the ones from existing construction sites, construction warehouses, hardware stores, etc., and start to expand into the surrounding territory from wherever our settlement is. If that happens to be in a Diamond City, then all of a sudden Diamond City starts to expand out. But then what that means is that wherever people have been, and where you're telling me as the storyteller, you're telling me people have been for hundreds of years, is going to be clean. It's going to be safe. It's going to have clean water. It's going to have functional toilets that aren't broken. It's going to have, like, that's the whole thing. And it's going to have a lot of children running around because that's what you would have to maintain a post apocalyptic society that way. And none of that happens. So it's kind of like, they're like, you're 210 years in the future. And you're like, wow. And then you play Fallout 76. Okay? Fallout 76 takes place in Appalachia, which is, you know, a stone's throw away from Boston and the Commonwealth. So it's, I mean, comparable, right? And it takes place 25 years after the bombs fall. Okay, so we have one that there's a 185-year gap in between these. And these two games look the same. They have the exact same environments. They have the exact same ruins. They have the exact same problem where people have set up rudimentary settlements and they are just barely surviving and they're barely getting things going and nobody's cleaned anything. And I'll be honest, it makes the most sense for Fallout 76 because that is exactly where they would be 25 years after the bombs fell. It's like, oh, we're still getting our shit together. We're just trying to survive. We haven't gotten comfortable enough yet to start to really clean the debris out and put new wall paneling up. Like this is a cobbled together thing, and then once we get past the cobbling, we will start to like really refine the infrastructure. That makes perfect sense to me. The frustrating part is that they're the same and I'm being told that they have a 185-year difference where I can't observe that. And there's nothing in the Fallout universe that explains this arrested development of why a society would still be where it's at after 210 years. And there are some storytelling mechanics that hint at it. The idea that you would have like some meddling of government entities and the people who wanted, you know, Vault Tech and the Enclave and some of the other factions within Fallout to, and especially Fallout 4, the Institute, to try to destabilize a civilization from happening again. But at the same time, it's like, at what point you can't possibly destabilize civilization in every little alcove where it's starting to coalesce. People naturally will want to come together, share resources, develop a little socialized community, and overcome a hostile environment. Especially when they have advanced technology at their disposal. Especially when they have, in some cases, this is the thing. Part of Fallout canon is that there are pre-war individuals. So people who were alive 210 years ago who became ghouls by the radiation. This is a side effect of whatever bombs, I guess, were dropped on the populace. But they are exposed to this special kind of radiation, and then they become a ghoul, which is like a kind of a zombie-fied thing, and a lot of times their noses fall off. But once they have the initial transformation, they are effectively immortal. They do not age, they don't get sick, they can't die of disease or natural causes, they can only die of, you know, lead poisoning. But there's a bunch of them that you run into. There's like at least half a dozen off the top of my head where they are pre-war people who are now ghouls. But the thing is, they are 100% lucid and they're articulate. And so you're going, if I was going to rebuild society after a potential like cataclysm and avoid a dark age, that is another way to completely speedrun this. To say, oh, here's somebody who has been around pre-war, who was highly trained, who could potentially educate new people and new wasteland dwellers and people from the vault who don't know what they're doing. And you have this through line of education that would allow society to get back up relatively quickly and start to tame that environment. Now, arguably, you walk out of a vault and you come out to a pretty, you know, like pretty organized society that has like, oh yeah, we remember the apocalypse. It's the talk of myth and legend, but now look, we've got streetlights and pavement and new clothing, and we've manufactured ways to get rid of radiation, and we've rebuilt stuff and blah blah blah. Arguably, that's not good gameplay, where you just walk around and you're like, huh, well, it worked. man, Vault Tech knew their stuff because now I get to just set up shop in this here post utopia. And instead, you wake up and you're like the only person in the world who has any sort of long term problem solving ability at all. Like, every single character that you run into the game is like, if only some outside person would tell us what to do, then our problems would be solved. And you're like, wait, I'm an outside person. You could do this. And they're like, really? Do you want to be our leader? And then you just do that over and over again. It makes it for interesting gameplay, but every time I go through this game, I'm like, I have to consciously suspend my disbelief because I'm being told, I'm like, oh yeah, we've been here for 200 years. And I'm like, then why is it filthy? Like, how come we're so far behind? How come we still have raider factions with no women in them? Is that a thing? Are they like, do they do like a recruitment drive? Because like they're not reproducing. And I know there are raider factions with women in them, and I guess it's implied that they have like little raiderettes somewhere. Like there's a tiny little brood of raiders that aren't out raiding that we never discover, but there is. That's a lot of hand waving. There's a lot of implied stuff that I'm doing on my end here. So I guess that boils out. We're at 30 minutes, so these are long. I guess that boils down to like, what type of Fallout game would I like to see in the future? And it's exactly that. Like, I would like to see a Fallout game that's set 50, 60 years after the Cataclysm, where it's on the cusp of that big push for reconstruction, where you're like disparate clans and settlements of survivors, disparate warlords and raiders, all sorts of threats. Like, but society is kind of kept going, but it's all in these little pockets. And this idea that you could somehow unite everybody into a common thing, and then have a game mechanic where you physically do like push out into the world in an incremental way, where you would first have a team that goes out and clears things of threats. Then you would have a second team that goes out and scavenges buildings for supplies. And then you'd have a third team that goes out that would go out and clean things up and remove the debris and get it ready to go. And then your last team is the one who goes out and rebuilds infrastructure to make buildings livable and functional again. And so what you would have effectively is this moving reconstruction line in the game as you progress the story and as things go, that also is somewhat automated. Because that's the thing that Bethesda has missed completely, is that if there is a thing in a game that can become a grind, you should at some point give the player the option to automate it so that you don't have to do that. And in Fallout 4, the thing that you can't automate is personally responding to all of the settlement issues. So there are 38 settlements in Fallout 4, and if you rig all of them up and you build every single settlement and you have them all connected, you will do nothing but get alerts that says you have to personally go and address the settlement stuff. And it is one of the most annoying. Like, when you start, you're like, oh, I got 3 settlements, this is cool. And you're like, I was starting to get like 10 of them, and you're like, all right. There's no reason at all, logistically speaking, that you couldn't, as the general of the Minutemen, go, cool, you right there in the tricorn hat, you solve that problem for me. Go. Like, there should be a delegation thing where you're like, any problems that come in, you 5 people, you go handle it. I'll give you all the gear you need. I am an overpowered hoarder. That was my superpower before the war. I was a hoarder, and I'm a hoarder still, and now it's to my advantage. I'm going to give you all sorts of gear. You are better outfitted than most militaries. Go off and solve these problems for me. I have other shit to do. Report back, and I'll feel really good that you did your jobs, etc. and so forth. That should be built into any future Fallout games, because it's like, I don't want, like, 1 or 2, that's fine, you know, low level. But when I get the ability to scale, let me scale it. Let it automate, please. And that way you would get this sort of agency of creating your own faction. A lot of times in the Fallout games, you have to ally with an existing faction, and because of the structure of how the game engine works, it is very much a linear story progression once you get into that faction to go, oh, I have to do this mission that leads to this mission that leads to that mission that leads to unlocking this store that leads to me doing this. So there's really just 4 or 5 linear tracks for the story. But it would be really, really interesting to be able to build your own faction and recruit people into it and, you know, kind of set what your agenda would be. And that would be like my wish list for a future Fallout game, as in addition to vehicles. Because we know that Bethesda can do horses because Skyrim exists, right? They have vehicles and caravans for fast traveling in Skyrim, which predates Fallout 4 by a ways. Yeah, Fallout must have come out in 2015. I don't remember. I'll look it up. Whatever. Fallout 4 did. Fallout 3 came out in like 2008 or 7. So, like, functional vehicles, because pretty much every single vehicle in Fallout is broken. Because the game engine couldn't handle you as the player in a vehicle trying to navigate this post-apocalyptic world full of debris and stuff everywhere. It just didn't work. So they were like, what if every motorcycle and every car and everything is exploded and none of them will work ever again? And it, sure. And again, we're in that suspension of disbelief thing where you're like, really? No vehicles work? And there's even a canonical horse in Fallout called the Giddy Up Buttercup, and it's a robot horse that little kids can play with. And I was like, at one point you go to the Giddy Up Buttercup factory, and I'm like, here it is. Here's the opportunity for Bethesda to just reskin a horse and put it in here, and then me as the Wanderer could have a robot horse to ride around on. Wouldn't that be real cool? And they go, no, you can't do it. So like, yeah, there's plenty of vehicle opportunities in there, and you could have different methods of the fast travel system. I think if you use it, if you're not in survival mode, the fast travel system is broken in that it's a little too convenient and it also crashes a lot. And I think it makes more sense to do what Skyrim did with the fast travel thing, which is, yes, technically you can fast travel, but you could also go to the stagecoach guy and like go to the wagon and be like, hey, can you take me to the other depots for this wagon that I've discovered? And he goes, oh yeah, we can do that. Like, getting a subway train running would be helpful. Having some sort of rail system that works as fast travel, or it can. I would love the opportunity to, like, in another life, if I could be the like lead game developer for Fallout and be like, let's make this good. Can we make it good? And we can integrate all sorts of fun dystopian sci-fi storytelling and vaults and all this nefarious stuff on top of it, but also try to build our little civilization here. And of course, you know, it would be like in jeopardy from different factions. You'd have to defend it. It could be a whole thing, you know. If you're listening, Bethesda, I am willing to be a consultant on Fallout 5. I know. I'd put some stuff away. I'd make the time. Let's put it that way. I'd make the time. Somewhere around here, I have my Pip-Boy. Hold on. Where is it? No, it's okay. Oh, no, it must be in the other. Ooh. I know where it is. It's in my office, and it's not here. Oh, well. Doesn't matter. All right. Until tomorrow, be kind to each other. Do you want to say goodbye? Say goodbye. Hey. I don't know what say goodbye would mean. Do you want to wave? Can you shake? Can you shake? Can you shake? Shake? Aw, that's close enough. All right, goodbye, Internet. Till tomorrow. Have a good day.